Well, friends, I am so excited because on Avid Readers of Christian Fiction today, we have two authors. Not only that, two amazing authors that wrote a book together. They've written many times, and I just cannot wait to dig into this book. With Each Tomorrow is a book I've really been enjoying. I love every minute of it, and we're going to dig into it right now. But first of all, we'll have our guests introduce themselves. So we'll start first with Kimberley Woodhouse and then Tracie Peterson. You could follow right after Kimberley.
Well, hi. So glad to be here again today. Thank you, Tricia. We just really, really appreciate you. And I love you to pieces. You know that already. So we got to have lunch a few weeks ago in Little Rock. And
We did.
Fun. I was so glad that our paths were able to cross. So I'm Kimberley, and my 40th book releases this year. I think I've written up to 45 now, but super excited that book number 40 is going to come out. But I'm kind of a peon compared to Miss Tracie. On our very first book tour together, it was a lot of fun because the first book that we wrote together, people were always asking on the book tour, well, how many books have you written? And it was book 9 for me. So, it was on, I could still count on 2 hands. And for Tracie, it was book 99. So that's the fun part I always like to talk about. I love her so much. We are dear, dear friends. I've been married for, this year will be 33 years to my husband, the love of my life, who is amazing. We have 2 incredible grown children who are both married, and the most adorable grandchild on the planet. I get to say that, right? I am Nana the Great, and we have another one that's about to pop any day.
Any day. A new baby, which is the best thing ever. Yeah. Well, Tracie, tell us a little bit about yourself, which, I mean, we should all know about Tracie, but go ahead, Tracie.
Well, I'm Tracie. Yes, thank you so much, Tricia, for having us. And it's always been one of the fun things to pick up one of your podcasts and listen. And I really enjoy the things that you do and say. So, and your writing. But I live in Montana with my husband of 43 or 44 years. Just seems like 40. No. Our oldest son lives with us. We have 2 daughters. They're scattered in the nation. And we have grandchildren that are grown. My grandson the youngest, just graduated. So I've written over 140 books and
Wow.
Love it because it's a ministry I do and always has been. So that's why I do what I do.
Oh, I love it. Okay, so we're going to just jump into this book because I have so many things to say about With Each Tomorrow. And this is set in Kalispell, Montana, where I lived for 15 years. And part of me was like, why did I not write this book? Because I lived there for 15 years and I was so jealous. Another part is I lived there for 15 years and I knew so little of these things. It would talk about like 3rd Avenue East, and my in-laws lived right off of 3rd Avenue East. Conrad Mansion is there, talks about Conrad Hill. I mean, there's so many things going on in the book, which is fascinating. But I'll let one of you pick. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the background of this book and why you wanted to set it in Kalispell?
Well, I'll go first, I think. I'll jump in, maybe. Tracie and I always have a lot of fun together when we are discussing what we're going to do next, for our next series ideas. And since we were both living in Montana at the time, we actually started with a series set in a different location, but it just wasn't going to work with the timing of everything. So Kalispell was my favorite place to go to. And my husband and I used to take all of our weekend trips up there when we could. And Tracie loved Kalispell. And we're like, ooh, let's do Kalispell. Because I stumbled across a newspaper article that was about the McIntosh Opera House, and this old historic place that, everybody wished that they could revive, but it's going to take millions of dollars, to refresh it. It has not been open for a very, very long time. So I'm reading this article thinking, oh, well, this would be fun. What if we found, historic places? So Tracie and I, get together, and I think that was the time I rode my bike over to her house, and I was like, oh, so what about this? And what about this? And she said, oh, look at the train depot. And I was like, oh, and the Carnegie Library. So that's the series. Is there's a very cool historic location that is still existent in Kalispell. It might be a different place now, but it's still existent. And we love just bringing to life some of these old historical venues. So then the story obviously just came out of that. We had way too much fun.
I
We
love that.
definitely did. We definitely did. Because for us, I mean, I know for me, and I think Kimberly feels the same way, setting is often a secondary character. And
Mhm.
so we just love to draw that out and research and learn all about the area. And, you know, I know you understand, Tricia. We do 100% in depth research and maybe use 10% of it. But the other 90 helps us to understand the time and the people and what would work and what wouldn't. And so we had so much fun just studying up and reading and watching videos and touring around Kalispell just to try to bring authenticity to the story.
I love that. So when we first moved to Kalispell in, say 1996, we stayed with some friends, and they were on 4th Avenue East, and they lived in a house where it used to be a doctor's house,
Mhm.
and they were cleaning out the attic. They were going to make it into a bedroom, and they found a whole bunch of old manuals and journals and medicine bottles. And so as I am in your book, I feel like, I know exactly, first of all, the places that they're talking about. And I remember just that moment where they had this discovery. We were there, and it's like this piece of history when you're in Kalispell is like, it is just so close because a lot of the old buildings, a lot of the old homes are there. Talks about the sidewalks. When we get up to the park, they're talking about building the chalets, currently the part that I'm reading right now. And
Mhm.
it's like, I have been in these places, and it is that the
Exactly.
character, I mean, the setting is like a character, but the characters are amazing. So let's talk about them a little bit. Let's start with Ellie or Eleanor. And I love that you put this, well, I love the part where she says, maybe I am a spinster. Like, I laughed out loud at that part. She's riding her bike through town and she's like, oh, maybe I am a spinster. But let's talk about her and then who would be her love interest. So let's start with Tracie this time. Tell us a little bit about these characters.
Oh, Eleanor was a fun one to write because she's an intellectual. And
Mhm.
oftentimes we don't allow for that in historical, adventure, action, romance, all that, because of the time period and women not being encouraged to
Mhm.
learn, study, be educated, that kind of thing. But Eleanor is an intellectual. She's very confident of herself, and she loves and adores her father, so she often goes with him and helps him in his work as a conservationist. And so they come to Kalispell with the interest of helping to get the area quartered off as a national park. And
Mhm.
so it's Kim and I was studying various national parks because we've written about Denali, I've written about Yellowstone, and she's written about Grand Canyon, and oh, I have too. But the thing was, we found all these interesting tidbits, that had to do with the area, and it took a while. They had interest in it for a long time to get that started. So Eleanor comes along with her father, and she is definitely one of these people who believes strongly in public lands. But she comes face to face with a hero who's very much supportive of private lands. And as you know, having lived here in Montana, that's a big issue. And so
Mhm.
we thought we would blend that into the story as well.
And it's still a big issue. It's still a big
It
issue
is.
today.
It
Like
is.
what
It's
they were talking about, the
huge.
railroad and moving and private ownership and public
Yes,
lands and all those things. I mean, it's still a current conversation. So when
very
you live
much
at
so.
some place that beautiful, there's the wealthy people coming in and just wanting to enjoy it, and there's the people like, no, it should be free for everyone. And yeah,
Right.
it's a common.
And then you
So
have
let's.
the multi-generation farmers
Mhm.
and ranchers who have worked this land forever and a day, and it's a part of their very blood, and they want to keep on doing what they're doing. And so, yes, you have this vast array of opinions and attitudes. But in this particular story, we also add the problem with the railroad and
Mhm.
the fact that they have decided to move the railroad. And this happened oftentimes in historical situations, and the railroad was the very life of the town. So Eleanor's coming there with her father, who's friends with Hill, who is in charge of this area of the railroad. And so you have all these conflicts blended together that causes her to butt heads with the hero.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes it so fascinating. You have the history, then you have the historical setting, then you have these characters that are basically on opposite sides of the coin. And I'm not quite to the middle of the book, and I'm like, I don't even know how they're going to resolve this, which is a good place to be. Because as an author, I usually have it all figured out in my head when I'm reading. I'm like, oh yeah, let me just see it play out. But now I'm like, I don't even know what they're going to do. And it just has me listening. I'm just like going on walks just so I can listen to my audiobook longer, so that's a
I
good
love
thing.
that. I love that.
Yeah. So, Kim, let's talk about the hero. Tell us a little bit about him.
Well, Carter, um, I told my daughter the other day when I was talking about this book, I said, he's a stinker.
He is a little stinker.
He's a little bit of an instigator. He's trying to be sweet and funny, and he loves the Lord. This is a really godly character, comes from a great family, but he is a little bit of a stinker in his instigation with Eleanor, and I think he knows and he
Yeah.
enjoys the fact that he can push her
He's
buttons.
snarky.
Yeah,
He's
Mhm.
snarky.
in a good way, in a gentleman kind of way for
Yes.
the most part. But he's been in Kalispell a long time. So Kalispell is his home, and he has been there with the railway being the hub, which is
Mhm.
huge. And when the railway hub moved from Demersville to Kalispell, Demersville died. So all
Yes.
of these people are floored when all of a sudden they hear that the railroad is thinking about moving the hub because Kalispell is a thriving town. And so what I wanted to show you is this really cool historic map that
Oh,
we've
yeah.
got. Can you see it?
Yes.
That's hand drawn. This is from 1897. So we use this for so much of our research and
Mhm.
everything because this was an accurate map. And I had to mark where everything was. You can probably see my little stickies on here because this is a bird's eye view of the city of Kalispell, Flathead County, Montana, 1897, looking southwest. So if you try to line it up with Google Maps, you have to, you know,
Mhm.
go crooked and upside down for the streets to line up, for you to see where stuff actually is. And it's just the coolest thing to be able to see this. But this town was so thriving and so well established and the heart of this whole Flathead County that it throws everyone into a tailspin in the town when they find out, especially
Yeah.
Carter and his family, because Carter owns the flour mill and his family has been raising wheat for all of these years, farming wheat. And what are they going to do? How are they going to get
Yeah.
to the train? How are they going to get supplies? How are they going to do all of this? It's such a huge impact. And they realize that the railroad hasn't really thought about the people in the town. They've been thinking about the future of the railroad because there were very dangerous passes and it was very
Mhm.
hard upkeep for the railroad. And they also wanted to make it where it could be closer to where the potential national park was going to be. So there's a lot of key players in here that have their own agendas,
Yeah.
but not everybody's thinking about the big picture for everyone. So there's lots of butting heads in the book.
Yeah, and Stumptown was what they originally called it, where they wanted where it became Whitefish. It
Mhm.
was a bad area. Like they're not just moving it to a different place. This is a rough and rowdy area, and
Right.
so it's going from this you have sidewalks and this nice homes and manicured lawns to. I mean, that's another
Yes.
element of it too. When they're moving it, so there's so many things that are happening. That's why I'm like, this is why I'm loving it because I don't know. I don't know how this is going to resolve. I mean, I've ridden the train from Whitefish to Glacier Park before. So, I mean, but I don't know what's happening in this book. So I'm loving every part of it. It's so great. And I'm just like enjoying it. But okay, so let's talk about the faith element too. Because what I love about both of your books is there's always a spiritual element. There's definitely Christian fiction that's just clean fiction, but
Mhm.
um, it's always there's going to be some spiritual journey, and that is definitely Ellie's spiritual journey. So let's talk a little bit about that. Either one of you can answer that.
Well, Ellie starts off as a young teenager at the very beginning of the book and suffers tremendous loss.
Mm-hmm.
And her mother had been very, very strong in faith, but it wasn't really established in her heart and in her life. It hadn't become hers. She had relied on her faith, kind of living through her mother. Her mother was such a huge impact in her life. And she pretty much just says, well, forget it, because what did he do for me? And going through a horrific loss, it hurt her so horrifically at such a tender age. And then she's following her father around for ever since, who's a conservationist. And he's just kind of, he's kind of been on the fence all of this time. And she's taken on whatever he says and whatever his friends and intellectuals talk about, because she's always the one taking notes. She's the one following around to all the lectures. She's hearing all of this, and she's just grabbing onto that, clinging to that, and thinking of that as truth. So she's gone from clinging to her mother for truth to clinging to her father
Right.
for truth, and not understanding truth for herself.
Mm-hmm.
And we often see, so, the clash between intellectualism and faith, that like the two can't exist together sometimes. It's really frustrating. And so I think that was something we wanted to draw out in this particular character, because we thought, there is still that conflict going on today, that, whether it's science and faith or intellectualism and faith, there's always these various contrasts that the world portrays, that the two cannot work together. And it's just not true.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you have a praying house mom, I guess you would call her, in the house. Someone that's gonna pray for Ellie, and gonna she picks up her Bible and she's gonna pray to give the right scriptures to Ellie. So talk about that, because I love that. Back in those times, it wasn't like you just there was motels or hotels or whatever they were called, but often people went and stayed with
Mhm.
other people, acquaintances. So let's talk a little bit about that, because I think even that element with, there's house servants, and there's other, they're dressing for dinner and all these things like they were doing back
Right.
east. But talk about just that caring person that is inserting herself basically into Ellie's life.
Well, we have the most marvelous character in Marvella.
Mhm, Marvella.
Marvella and the judge, her husband. And Marvella has never known an issue or a problem or a person that she didn't feel entitled to insert herself into thoroughly. And she has a little white dog named Sir Theophilus. And we just love and adore this couple. We decided they had to go throughout the entire series because
Mhm.
they're just too cute and too fun. But I've known an older woman like this. And,
Mm-hmm.
I've known several, in fact, old ladies in the church is what I call them, the blue haired ladies, whatever.
Yeah.
But I love and adore them because they're unapologetic for the
Mhm.
gospel. They're unapologetic for the fact that they feel like they're on earth for one purpose, and that is to get everybody saved.
Yep.
And so Marvella is just confident in her faith. She loves to talk about Jesus, and she's just a fun character, lest anybody think, oh, here's a boring old, pillar of the church or whatever. Marvella is not boring. She is just lively. She's a live wire, and she loves to help people, and she's just got the kindness, you know, just a depth of kindness that I hope I'll have when I'm her age.
Mm-hmm.
I
She is,
love
I
that.
think, our most entertaining character in the series. She and her
Yep.
husband, the judge. We love Marvella. And I think of her as she's not only the town matchmaker and trying to get couples
Right.
together, she's the town matchmaker. And it's like, if you're not saved, I'm going to get you saved. So in the first book, I've had more readers that have written in about this one line, and it was at the end of a chapter, and they're having a little ladies gathering, and she says, "It's getting late, but it's time for cake, so I'll get her saved in the morning."
Yeah.
I love
that,
that.
that's
We've
basically
had
Marvel.
so many letters about Marvella. I mean, people will write and say, I knew this woman, or this woman was my grandmother, I could just hear my grandma saying this. So she resonates.
Yes.
Yes. And I think it is so important to have those people that are just going to say it how it is, that, and they're unapologetic about their faith in God. They love
Yes.
Jesus and they're just going to share it. And it's so fun. I mean, yeah, she's wonderful. Her little white dog, her little white dog is great too. Okay, so let's talk about co-authoring. I've
Sure.
co-authored novels, and it's so much fun because someone else knows your made-up characters that are in your mind, and you get to talk about things, and you can use each other's strengths. So
Mhm.
how does that work with the two of you?
Oh,
Very
you want
well.
Yeah, obviously, well, I'm reading very well, but how does it
you know,
actually
you know,
work?
I started out co-writing with Judith Pella for
Mhm.
Bethany House, and that was just an amazing experience. And from that point on, I've co-written with a lot of different people, and usually the whole idea is to help somebody else get established, share my
Mhm.
audience with them, encourage my audience that this is a great new writer that I think that they'll enjoy. But it's really critical that you find somebody, in our case or in my desires for co-writing, that it flows seamlessly. I don't want it to be a
Right.
situation where one person says, "Oh, this part Kimberly wrote and this part Tracie wrote." And, I
Mhm.
prefer this style to that style and blah blah blah. You know, I don't want that, and neither did Kim. And we talked about how we could make this as seamless as possible, because she has written in that style where one person wrote one perspective and her daughter wrote the
Mhm.
other, and it was very clearly divided, but it worked in that situation and it was meant to be that way.
Mhm.
So I read Kim's stuff before I ever talked to her about co-writing, and I knew that I felt confident we could pull it off. But co-writing in general, I have been taught, and it has worked well over the years, to have, sit down and brainstorm your story and then write a detailed synopsis, which I know a lot of Seat of the Pantsers are cringing now, even as I speak these words. But I've come to the conclusion, after 140 plus books, we're doing the same thing. I'm just making a very abbreviated novel. They're sitting down and writing the whole novel. We both still have to go over it and flesh it out and make it the book that we want it to be. So I'm just writing a very, very abbreviated novel
Yes.
when I write my 40-page chapter by chapter synopsis. But then Kim takes it in this situation of our co-writing, and she writes the first draft, and she has most of the work load on her. So she's the senior partner, and she has the final say. And I can honestly say that's really only come up once, and Kim can tell you about it because it was really quite amusing. But
It
Well,
was
you're still
fun.
friends, so that means something, right?
yes, we're still
Yeah.
friends.
Yeah. In fact, we've never really had, I mean, we disagreed on a
Yeah.
character, but it's not like we fought or
Yes.
anything over it. She
Mm-mm.
just took
I
the
just took
character
him out.
out. So it was the year that I almost died. And I love how God does things and prepares us, because we had a manuscript due. It was due in a few weeks, and we'd
Mm.
had a horrible fire that had come through and just devastated our whole area and community. And then it was going from Colorado to Kansas and Oklahoma, and it was just this huge mess. So I'm doing fire relief at the church, and I'm in charge of everything, because crazy me, that's just how things happen, right? And um, for some reason, I told Tracie, I was like, I just feel like I'm supposed to send this to you now. And it wasn't finished. So normally when I write, we do all the brainstorming together and we figure out exactly how we want it. Then she writes the long synopsis, and then I write, the first draft, and I send it to her, and she adds her brilliance, which it really is. This is Tracie Peterson, it's her brilliance. And so normally I write it short, though, so there's plenty of room for her to add 10, 15,000 words. And then there's another space for me to add another 10,000 or so words, in that edit part. And I sent it to her like 30,000 short rather than, 20, 25,000 short. It was more than that. It was probably only 45,000 words, I think. And I sent it to her and I said, it's not finished. I said, but I just feel like I'm supposed to send this to you because we have craziness. And I knew that she was about to take a trip. And so I said, I want you to have this in your hands. I feel like I'm supposed to send it to you. And I'm so glad I did, because 3 days later, I was in the hospital and I had 3 major surgeries. And I was in and out of the hospital for 6 weeks.
Nearly died.
Nearly died. And then during that time, her nephew went through an awful thing and he passed away. And so that book that we were writing was Out of the Ashes. And it's kind of funny how we were coming out of the ashes as well. So through the editing stage, it was great. But this one character, because I'd written it short, there wasn't a whole lot of what was in my brain, right, for this character. And she took him out. And I said, well, I really think it's necessary for how it's going to happen here at the end. So I asked the editors first before I really, asked Tracie if it was okay. And they were like,
she wanted support. She wanted support.
I'm like, I don't have the clout to, tell her, no, we need to have this character. We're such good friends. We don't ever talk to each other that way. So, and we laugh about it now because she just really didn't like this character at all. Yeah. And now she's fine. She's fine with it.
After she fleshed him out and showed me where it was going, it made total sense. But in the version I had, I couldn't figure out what in the world we needed him for.
Why was he there?
He just seemed like more words, we're just padding this. And I am a firm believer in not padding.
Tracie is, especially in our writing relationship, she is the expert in the romance area and making sure that thread is really strong. And I'm always all of these subplot crazy things, and killing off people.
She's excellent with her villains. Oh my gosh. She will make your skin crawl with her villains.
I know.
So, and
she makes them truly despicable villains.
And he was a despicable character, and he wasn't fleshed out. He wasn't part of the romance. So Tracie's like, well, you don't need him.
We don't need him. That's right. Less is more.
I love that.
We have a great time writing together.
Do you ever have one of you call or message other like, so I added something that Kim's like, Kim
does that all the time. And I do too. I mean, there have been times when I've added things and I'll say to her, I added this part. If you don't like it, let's talk about it or just take it out or whatever. But almost always, I mean, we are able to blend these things together. And once we give explanation for why we think that's needed, it usually makes sense to the other person as well,
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah, I just finished co-written my second book with my son. And that's always, and I will kind of I'm kind of Tracie's role and he's kind of Kim's role. I will do the major, like this is all the pieces. He goes and does it. And then I'm like, so I added this other person. He's like, wait, what? Who is that? I'm like, I don't know, but they're supposed to be there. And then later he's like, oh, we can have it be this person. And so all of a sudden we melt. That's the fun part. When suddenly the pieces start coming together. And that's the fun thing about co-authoring. Yeah. I love that. Okay, so, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. When Kayla and I wrote together, because she was a teen, she was 12, she was a tween. She wrote all the POV characters in first person of the teens, because it was mother daughter, in the book. And so it worked beautifully and the readers absolutely loved it. But I'll never forget one day, we're sitting on the couch just writing away on our laptops. And then after we'd write a few scenes, we'd throw our jump drives, across the room at one another. This was a long time ago. Yeah. And she would plug it in. And I remember her going, Mom. I was like, what? She goes, I needed that character and you killed him off. And I guess I'm really good at killing off characters.
Don't kill everybody.
Yeah, he could live for a little while. We'll resurrect him for a little bit, and then you can kill him off later.
Oh, that is so good. Okay, so you mentioned series. So talk about where this book falls in the series and what else can we expect and all the things.
Woo-hoo. Well, this is book 2. in the Jewels of Kalispell series. And we have just been writing, we just finished writing book 3. We're super excited about
Okay.
that.
Yes.
So,
And
book
each
1,
book stands alone. They really
yes.
do. You don't
Okay.
have to read them in order even, but it's more fun, I think, if you do.
I will say, because I picked up this one not realizing it was a book 2 when I started it, and I didn't miss a beat. Like, I just picked up
Right.
and everything made sense. I didn't have to like, "Who's this? What's happening?" So, what's the title of book 1?
The Heart's Choice.
The
And
Heart's
the
Choice.
only thing that connects them is Kalispell, and the timeline, it does move rapidly through a very short span of time, the series. But the Judge and Marvella, the only thing that's different is that you would get different stories, sprinklings of those characters. Otherwise,
Yes.
they are standalone. But the first book was the Carnegie Library, and this book is the Great Northern Railway Depot, and which is still there. And so watch
Mhm.
closely. I'm going to be posting soon about the creepy basement that I ventured down into the depot.
The basement came up. She's like, "Oh, the basement." He's like, "No, it's off limits." And she goes, "Uh-huh." So I knew that the basement's going to be coming up. So we used to do homeschool. We would take the kids to Depot Park right there at the
Mhm.
depot, and
Yeah.
every Wednesday at noon they would have music, live
Mhm.
music at Depot Park. So that was
Oh.
super fun. I know all these places. This is why it's so fun. I'm like, I know all these places.
I,
Okay, so
and then book
we're
3.
definitely going to check these out, but I know you guys are up to other books too. So just tell
Yes.
us what else, because both of you are very busy writers. So just say in the next year, what else can we expect from you guys? Because we're not going to go into all of them because that's just
Yeah.
going to be too long of a list.
Go, Tracie.
I'm doing 2 3-book series set in Cheyenne, Wyoming. Book 1 came out in
Oh.
March. It was called A Love Discovered. And book 2 comes out in July. It's Choice Considered. And I wanted to start with Cheyenne's history when the Transcontinental Railroad
Mm.
created the town of Cheyenne. And so we start with that. And the first 3 books are set in the late 1860s. And then the second series will be set in the late 1880s and cruise right into statehood then. And, again, I tried to make each book stand alone, but of course, the characters are, there's far more connection in this series than there was in the Kalispell series. So, I encourage readers to try to read them in order, and it just makes it, to me, it makes it more enjoyable that way.
I love that. All right, Kim, what about you?
Well, this book, is book 2. Then book 3 will release next year in May, and that's the Macintosh Opera House one. We're super excited about that one in Kalispell. So then I have book 3 in my Women in Paleontology series, which is Treasures of the Earth from Bethany House, and that comes out in September. And those can all be standalone read. They just follow a timeline of women in paleontology from the late 1800s through 1915 when Dinosaur National Monument was created. And so that's book 3. Set in Stone just released. That was book 2. And then in October is 70 North, which is the conclusion to the Alaskan Cyber Hunters series. Oh, there's 8 down.
Yep. And we
Yep.
have to congratulate Kim
I was
because
just going to say that. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
no, you
Go
go
ahead.
ahead. You've got all the
So,
information. I'm just so proud of her.
an award nominee in the house? Do we say
Woohoo!
So yeah,
so?
26 Below. I just found out last night that it was a finalist in the Carol Awards, and it's the 5th award that it's up for. That I'm
The
just kind of
5th award.
blown my mind with that. 2 of them are secular awards that I didn't even realize, it was entered in. So it's pretty cool just to see what God's doing through this fun series. And I do have to warn all my historical readers, but they've all loved it. The fact that a few more people die and
But she's killing more people, and we're not surprised.
Yeah, and she has
character.
the
Yeah.
creepiest villain of all time in this series. And I mean, you want to go take a shower after you read about him. He's just creepy.
She looks so sweet. She looks
I
so sweet.
know, I know. She's fooling us all.
Yes, I know. Oh, so okay. So definitely go get these books. Everything we mentioned, just go get them or go
Yeah,
ask your library. We love when you ask your library to order them because then lots of
we
readers can
do.
enjoy them. So where can people find you online? We'll start with you, Tracie, and then we'll go to you, Kim.
Oh, you can get me at traciepeterson.com. Uh, that's my website, and there's all sorts of information there, and you can send me a message to my books, or there's a place there to leave messages and whatnot. And then you can find me on Facebook at authortraciepeterson.com.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And Kim?
So mine is kimberleywoodhouse.com, and my name is spelled with an Ley. But even if you misspell it, it'll get there because I own all the different domains because people always spell my name wrong. I think even if you do kimwoodhouse.com, it will get there. But all of my links for social media and contacts and all kinds of stuff are on my website. So I would love to connect with you there and just love being a part. And I love being a part of Avid Readers. Can I just say
Mhm.
that?
Oh,
This
yes. Oh,
trip,
my gosh. This is such a great group.
it's such a blessing, and just to hear from the readers so much. And I get tagged a lot, and it's fun just to see all the discussion that is
Yes.
happening, just the talk about Christian fiction, which we so desperately need, to be sharing Jesus's light in this lost and dying world. And for people, I love it when I see new people post that say, I just discovered Christian fiction, and they find the group, and it's like, oh, praise God, what a
And
cool
then they're blown away because then they're like,
Yes.
"What other novels can I
Yes.
read?" And 500 comments will follow.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Great.
But the thing is, I'm much older than you two. So I can remember when there hardly was Christian
Mhm.
fiction. And so to have this connection, to have the internet, the various podcasts, the places, that blogs and whatnot that you can go and read and comment, it's just a tremendous fellowship. And I really
It is.
appreciate that. I wish there had been something like this when I was younger.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you helped to build it, so thank you. Thank you for giving us lots of books to read. Yeah, and make it possible for more of us to
Well,
write Christian fiction. But the book again is With Each Tomorrow, Tracie Peterson and Kimberley Woodhouse. So thank you so much, friends.
Thank you.
thank you, Trish.